I think one thing that often gets lost in these conversations is that some of us have to actually live the future that you all are setting on fire for us. By 2028, crop yields are already projected to begin to fail, with famine beginning to hit the world's most vulnerable populations. By 2038, current US drought, fire, and extreme heat trends could potentially make whole regions of the United States unlivable if we continue the trends that lobbyists are trying to have us pursue. And we have a tipping point by 2036. We do not have the privilege or the luxury of lobbyist spin. And it is incredibly important that we don't reach net zero or in some imaginary future, but that we actually cut through to carbon emissions reductions here in the United States and globally. I submit back to the chair.
After months of tough and thoughtful negotiations, I think we have I know we have a historic economic framework. It's a framework that will create millions of jobs, grow the economy, invest in our nation and our people.
U.S. President Joe Biden on Thursday unveiled a $1.75 trillion economic and climate change plan that he said unified Democrats, but it was immediately rebuffed by members of his own party. The plan includes $555 billion in spending for climate initiatives.
And enough to position us for a 50 to 52% emission reductions by the year 2030.
The plan also includes 6 years of preschool funding and a minimum tax on companies with over $1 billion in profits.
A minimum tax of 15%.
But the framework does not include a tax on billionaires or paid family leave, which Democrats had struggled to keep in. According to a source, Biden on Thursday pleaded with House Democrats for their support, telling reporters on Capitol Hill,
I think we're going to be in good shape.
A rift between progressive and moderate Democrats has threatened progress on Biden's agenda, including a $1 trillion infrastructure bill. Progressives have said they wouldn't vote for the infrastructure bill, despite a push from House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to do so on Thursday, without a deal on the social spending bill, once targeted at $3.5 trillion. Key progressive Democrats poured cold water on the idea. Senator Bernie Sanders said the House should not be voting for an infrastructure bill unless they see very clear language and know that there are 50 senators on board. Leader of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, Pramila Jayapal, also said she wants to see more.
My understanding is that the framework is very general, so let's turn it into legislative text.
Biden had hoped to reach an agreement before attending a G20 meeting in Rome. Still, the White House has signaled optimism, saying the spending plan does have the support of all 50 Democrats in the evenly divided Senate, and it is confident the bill can also pass the House.
For far too long, big oil has escaped accountability for its central role in bringing our planet to the brink of a climate catastrophe. That ends today.
Democratic lawmakers on Thursday grilled the country's top oil executives on climate change, claiming they spent years spreading disinformation about the role fossil fuels play in global warming and seeking pledges they will work in earnest to reduce carbon emissions. Representative Carolyn Maloney, chair of the House Oversight Committee, asked the CEOs of ExxonMobil, Chevron, BP America, and Shell if they would agree to stop spending money to oppose efforts to reduce emissions, appearing less than satisfied with BP America CEO David Lawler's response.
Will you take the pledge, yes or no?
Well, for your specific pledge, what we're pledging to do is advocate for low-carbon policies that do, in fact, take the company and the world to net zero. That's the pledge I'm willing to commit to.
Well, I'm asking if you'll stop spending money either directly or indirectly to oppose efforts to reduce emissions and address climate change. Just stop spending money.
Madam Chair.
That's on lies.
Time.
Okay, I take that you don't want to take the pledge. All right.
It was the first time that the top oil executives and the heads of the American Petroleum Institute and U.S. Chamber of Commerce answered questions about climate change in Congress under oath. Democrat Ro Khanna compared the moment to the big tobacco hearings of the 1990s, which marked a major shift in public opinion about the tobacco industry.
You are powerful leaders at the top of the corporate world at a turning point for our planet. Be better.
BP's Lawler and Shell CEO Gretchen Watkins defended their positions in part by discussing current efforts to adapt their business models to add more renewable energy and lower emissions.
At Shell, we're in action on providing lower and no carbon products to our customers.
Exxon's Darren Woods and Chevron CEO Mike Wirth also played up oil and gas as being essential for operation of hospitals, schools, and offices.
The purpose of this hearing is clear: to deliver partisan theater for primetime news.
Meanwhile, Representative James Comer, the top Republican on the committee, said the panel should be addressing inflation and high energy prices and did not mention climate change in his opening remarks. The hearing kicks off a year's worth of investigations into whether big oil deceived Americans about its role in climate change, and came as President Joe Biden heads to Scotland for UN climate talks.
A week after former President Donald Trump announced plans to launch a social media platform, and shares of the SPAC, or Special Purpose Acquisition Company, associated with Truth Social surged on the news, some stock analysts are scrutinizing Trump's lofty new venture.
It's a horrible idea.
Michael Pachter is the managing director of equity research at Wedbush Securities.
It's one thing to, build a news channel like Fox or OAN that's a cable channel and can thrive on 1 million users, viewers, or 500,000 viewers or smaller, because the carriage fees on cable are pretty low. But a social media network is going to depend upon advertising dollars. And making a social media channel that is dedicated to a small subset of users is going to limit its potential.
Trump lost his social media megaphone this year when Twitter, Facebook, and other social media platforms either permanently or temporarily banned him from their services after he was accused of inciting violence at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. Now Trump is seeking another direct line to his supporters as he mulls a presidential run in 2024.
It will be simple. It will be easy.
Like Pachter, analyst Max Wolf, the CEO of Systematic Ventures, also sees challenges, telling Reuters that entering into competition with other social media platforms is not easy.
Look, building a new social media is very, very difficult medium because the real value here is the people on board. And so to catch up to a Facebook, you have the small task of onboarding a few billion people, which might sound easy, but it could be tricky. Odds are that this $2.2 and counting billion undertaking will end pretty badly, especially if it's built around one person who, however dynamic, is older and maybe past that person's peak influence and social footprint.
But some believe there are people out there who have never been more starved for content from the former president, and shares of the SPAC linked to the new social media venture have been snapped up by amateur traders and Trump supporters, including U.S. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who bought as much as $50,000 worth according to a regulatory filing. Trump can also point to his at one time enormous social media following and NBC's hit show The Apprentice as past successes that could bode well for a new media company, but Pachter says it's Trump's past failures and bankruptcies that loom larger.
No business I can think of that he's ever been in, no non-real estate business, ever made money. He failed in casinos, airlines, steaks, wine, ties, everything else.
In a press release, the CEO of Digital World Acquisition, the Florida-based shell company linked to Trump's new media enterprise, said the partnership would create public shareholder value and called it, quote, one of the most promising business combination partners to fulfill that purpose. Truth Social is set for beta launch next month and full rollout in the first quarter of 2022.
The Justice Department said it has reached a settlement with the families of victims and survivors of a mass shooting that killed 9 black people at a historic South Carolina church in 2015. The agreement settles more than a dozen claims that blamed the FBI for failing to prevent a gun from being sold to Dylan Roof. The white supremacist who said he wanted to start a race war when he opened fire inside the Mother Emanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in June 2015. According to a news release Thursday, 5 survivors will receive $5 million, while the families of those killed in the shooting will each receive between $6 million and $7.5 million. A statement released by U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland read in part, quote, "Since the day of the shooting, the Justice Department has sought to bring justice to the community, first by a successful hate crime prosecution, and today by settling civil claims. Families and survivors argued in lawsuits that the FBI's background check system did not flag that Roof was banned from having a firearm before he purchased a handgun that was used in the mass shooting. In December 2016, a jury found Roof guilty of 33 federal charges for the mass shooting. The same jury sentenced him to death in January 2017.